infrared eyes, scanning the black, tracking the heat, never turning back. Control 22, a covert gaze. Control 33, in the cosmic maze. Controls in the mix, secrets untold. Silent watchers, brave and bold. In the shadows, they silently glide, protecting our interest, far and wide. As Bearden, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. In the silence of space, they keep their post, shields unseen yet feared the most. With precision and speed, they warn of danger, keeping us safe from the missile's anger. As Bearden, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. Controls in the mix, secrets untold, silent watchers, brave and bold. In the shadows, they silently glide, protecting our interest, far and wide. As Bearden, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star. As Bearden, sentinel of the night, watching over with infrared sight, alerting us to threats afar, guiding our defenses like a guiding star.
Yo. My sound always changes. Hey guys, welcome to the stream tonight. Glad you guys are all here. We did get started a couple minutes early because it's going to be a short stream tonight. So I wanted to make sure that we had enough time to go over everything that we need to be able to go through. So welcome everybody. Hey William, nice to see you, man. Starduster, Anthony, good to see you guys in the chat. Eskil, nice to see you. Siljo, Joe Moss, yeah. Tier, nice to see you as well. Yeah, we are going over Thomas Bearden stuff tonight. I did just post. Why is this like all messed up? There we go. Okay. I did just post a paper by Thomas Bearden on extracting energy from the vacuum. Today is Free Energy Friday, so I'm glad you guys are here to listen to this. You guys can check that out on my YouTube page to see the name of it. You can just Google it. You'll find the link. I also posted it in the YouTube channel on the description. So if you want to find it down there as well. So the way this is going to play out, I've decided I'm going to probably just repeat the science concepts for people so that they can understand how this stuff is possible. And then we will go and dig into the content every time we have one of these streams. I think that repetition is going to be extremely important. Good to see you, 1776. Beth, good to see you as well. Nice to see you guys. Okay. Before I start that, I am going to address the flat earth arguments that have been going back and forth very, very briefly. The earth is not flat. If you think the earth's flat, I'm sorry, you're wrong. That's fine. You're allowed to have whatever opinions you want. But the earth is not flat. We've known the earth is not flat for roughly 2,500 years. In order for the earth to be flat, horizons have to be fake. Space has to be fake. Satellites have to be fake. Basically, everything scientifically based has to be fake. And it's not. In fact, the science that I push necessitates a not flat earth. So I've never been a flat earther. I'll never be a flat earther because I understand empirical evidence. So I just need to get that out there. If people think that I'm going to debate flat earthers, that's never going to happen. I literally think that flat earthers are basically the same as debunkers. They just pick and choose what logic and arguments they want to adhere to. And this is a science-based community for the most part. So if that hurts your feelings, I'm sorry, but I don't really care at the end of the day. So there we go. We're going to move on from that now. We don't have to address any more flat earth stuff. And also, just because I believe that the ether is real, it does not mean that the earth is flat. Not in any way, shape, or form. The conclusion of the Michelson-Morley experiment was not that the earth is not moving. It's not that the earth is flat. None of those are the conclusions of the Michelson-Morley experiment. And in order to get that a completely different experimental result, all they had to do was flip it on its side. And then you can see that there is a rotation that's has some relationship to gravity. So, okay, Cool. We got that done with. Now the next thing is the scientific concepts. Okay. So what does mainstream physics not understand? That is right there in their face. I mean, this is right there in their face. The stuff that I'm pushing is not something that I didn't come up with this theory. I have just, from seeing the MH370 videos, was able to find all the science that's out there that supports it. And this is in science from like lightweights. These are like literal government engineers that have worked in black projects mostly their whole lives. So these are the people that, if there are secrets out there, they're the ones to know. We're going to be looking at Thomas Bearden video today. We're going to look a little bit at their scientific papers as well. Now, the thing that everyone needs to understand is that the universe is filled with energy. Okay, the universe is not empty. That's what people don't seem to grasp. The universe is filled with energy. We are energy. Everything around us is energy. E equals mc squared means energy equals mass if you move it to the speed of light squared. Simple as that, right? So when you realize that the universe is not empty, space is not empty, space is not something down here, the space is this energy up here, then you realize, well, we can extract energy here to gain energy here. Okay? This is the concept behind everything that I've been talking about. This is the concept behind 0-point energy. This is the concept behind free energy, which is just absorbing or using that energy. This is how we get around the laws of thermodynamics, and we have to kind of think about them a little bit differently, but we don't necessarily have to break them depending on your thought process. This is also how we can actually manipulate space-time, because when you manipulate these energy levels, you're actually manipulating space-time itself, and space and time are connected. Distance and time are connected with respect to space-time. So when you understand it from that perspective, you understand how we can produce a wormhole, you understand how we can produce free energy, you understand how we can create a warp drive, and you understand how we can manipulate the energy levels to accomplish these types of things, to create negative energy. Because negative energy is not some magical substance that's out there, okay? Yeah, we are basically swimming in fluid all the time. We're fish swimming in fluid. I'm not talking about the air. I'm talking about like the energy all around us all the time. That's why we feel resistance. Like, even though you don't generally feel, you wouldn't recognize resistance, but like when I hit this microphone, I'm hitting it because I'm hitting it. My electrons in my hand are hitting the electrons in the microphone. Okay. So it's really not that complicated of a concept to get your brain around. And once you realize that, then you can figure out where dark energy comes from. What is dark energy? Dark energy is the latent energy on the fabric of space-time. It's, if we need to have the space-time expand faster than the speed of light, dark energy is the answer. The energy that's all around us. You imagine if you started at a single point filled with infinite amount of energy, and then it expands. That energy is going to dissipate out or expand outward. It's going to cover all of space-time. Presumably, that's what the whole universe is made up of. Okay. Now that that's been said, let's take a look at this scientific paper that I've got here. Because there's another concept on here that I'm going to explain before we even get into looking at the paper. And then we're going to watch a 30-minute video as well. So we got to get through this kind of quickly. So I'm not going to be able to go through the whole paper today. And also, it's extremely long. I did post a link to the paper in the YouTube description if you want to read the whole thing yourself. We will most likely do a part 2 next week on this because there's another paper by Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis that is basically the same exact name as this paper. So I want to see the comparisons. Here's the main thing that you need to understand. Energy does not come from a little battery. A battery creates a dipole. A dipole is when you have positive and negative charges that are out of equilibrium. And then you have that causes the circuit to flow. This is how we think we get energy. When we watched the Vertasium video several months ago, we realized that power is flowing through the fields that are generated by the circuit. And it doesn't mean they're flowing along the wire. They can flow directly from the source to the receiver. What Thomas Bearden is going to propose here, which I 100% agree with, is that all power comes from the vacuum. All power. The power of my light right there, and the power of that light, the power of that light. All power is coming from the vacuum. All power. And once you realize that we're in this ocean filled with energy, it makes a lot of sense. It seems like it's coming from a little battery or what have you, but that's not what's happening. It's basically just the conduit that allows us to tap into the energy of the ether. And when you look at it from that perspective, you go, okay, well, now if I think about it like that, then maybe there are ways where we can get unlimited energy, where we can break the system, right? Like going back to the magic card analogy, we make our deck that breaks the rules, we bend the rules. So let's take a look at this paper here. I got the S beers in my head. S beers. Okay, so right off the bat, we present new concepts which provide usable extraction of electromagnetic energy from the vacuum and appear to be present but previously unrecognized in all electrical power systems. We argue that generators and batteries do not use their available internal energy to power their external circuits, but dissipate it to separate their internal charges, right, positive and negative, to produce source dipoles as negative resistors. Once formed, the source dipole receives and transduces electromagnetic energy flow from the vacuum and pours it out along the attached circuit, filling all the surrounding space. This is true. This is what we saw from the Vertasium video, is the fields are what's causing the power to be able to flow. Electromagnetic circuits and loads have always been powered by vacuum-provided electromagnetic energy. They are not powered by the energy operator inputs to the generator shaft, nor by the chemical energy in the battery. So right there, huge revelation, right? Basically says, I'll make my face a little bit bigger. I'll make this bigger too. How's that? There we go. So basically says that we are not, the energy that we are getting from our electrical system is not coming from what it seems like coming directly from the battery, right? It's coming from the energy of the ether all around us, from the vacuum, if you want to think of it like that. Okay, so then he digs into some of the deep science here, and he talks about the Poynting vector as well. Now, if I dig down into this, this is also interesting here. So the connection between the field and its source has always been and still is the most difficult problem in classical and quantum mechanics. We give the solution to the problem of the source charge in the classic electrodynamics. The giant negentropy mechanism also explains the herefore unknown source of the enormous dark, unaccounted electromagnetic energy flow. He's saying right here, this explains dark energy, right? Then why do batteries die off? It is going to discuss that a little bit in here. I didn't find the exact spot where he talks about it, but you're going to probably see here in a minute why they die off. And what he just said there, just to answer the question of the batteries, as far as I understand from what I just read, is that the energy in the battery is being used to create the dipole, to separate the positive and negative charges, which is what's allowing the battery to be a conduit to the vacuum and pull the energy out of the vacuum. So the issue there is it takes work in order to do that, to separate it. So that's why the battery runs out. Now, if you could create a system that you don't have to do work to separate the charges, then you would have a system where like you've tapped in and now you've created a well where the oil and the energy is just flowing out freely. We're going to get to that in a minute. So hopefully that answers your question for right now. Okay. So blah, 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 dark energy component that was discovered by Heaviside, but never considered by Poynting. And it was arbitrarily discarded by Lorentz because Lorentz's discard of the the Heaviside dark energy flow component has continued to be applied by electrodynamics. Which one's ASR? Asymmetrical self-regulating. So asymmetrical self-regulating provides an open electromagnetic system far from the thermodynamic equilibrium in its violent energy exchange with the active vacuum. So what he's saying there is that the active vacuum has this energy state within it. Okay. And that you can imagine that instead of, once again, of having this zero equilibrium, no energy, you've got this equilibrium of energy that's out there. So we can extract energy from here. We can generate energy over here. And this is always happening. All energy we're taking from everywhere is always coming from this vacuum state. That we are in a big cycle of energy where we pull the energy out, the energy dissipates back into the environment and perpetuates forever. It is, as it is well known, an open dissipative system and disequilibrium with the active environment is permitted to self-order, self-rotate, self-oscillate, output more energy than is input by the operator. The excess is taken from the active environment, in this case, the active vacuum. So he was already talking about it right here. Where are we getting the energy? We're getting it from the vacuum. It can power itself and its load simultaneously. All the energy is taken from the active environment, in this case, the active vacuum, and it can exhibit negentropy. Because he says here as well that basically, so essentially, if you look at it from the perspective of the energy is always being taken from the environment, that means every electric system is a negative entropy system. All of these systems are pulling energy out of the environment. And then the question is just like with people say about the Casimir effect, right? They say the Casimir effect shows that we can get energy out of the vacuum. It proves that. But then people say, well, it doesn't matter because you have to take energy to separate the plates, right? In order to pull the plates back apart, we have to do work to do that. And they're right. We do have to do that. That's the same problem with the battery. So then the question is, how do we make a system where we can extract the energy without separating the plates, without having to put the energy back in to do the work? That's the big question. That's how we should figure out how to extract the energy. Okay, we're going to skip through some of this. And there's good stuff in here. I'm just skipping this for the sake of time. He actually talks about scalar potential and phase conjugate waves here, and longitudinal waves and wave pairs here, which I'm going to end up digging into more probably for our next week's stream. And then 4 symmetry electrical engineering as opposed to 3 symmetry electrical engineering, which seems like it's the difference between, I shouldn't even say, I'm not 100% sure yet. Okay, so the conclusions of all of that ends up being, if the hypothesis holds, we've arrived at some interesting findings. As is a well-known in particle physics, a dipole is a broken 3-space symmetry in the violent flux exchange between the active vacuum and the dipole. So he's saying your battery is basically interacting with the active vacuum, pulling energy in. This dipole is broken 3-space symmetry in electromagnetic energy flow. It provides a relaxation to a more fundamental electromagnetic energy flow symmetry in 4-space, where P and T symmetries are broken, but CPT symmetry is maintained. I'll have to look at what those are. This means that time, or time-like electromagnetic energy flow, is transduced into 3-spatial electromagnetic energy flow. Hence, we must understand time as energy and time-like energy flow, as well as 3-spatial electromagnetic energy flow. The connection to time here is interesting because when we bend space-time, we're also bending time with respect to energy. There is no law of nature or physics that requires 3 symmetry of electromagnetic energy flow as an additional condition applied to 4 symmetry electromagnetic energy flow. And this should make sense here, I think, when we get towards the bottom. The dipole is a practical and very simple means of breaking the additional 3 symmetry flow condition in electromagnetic energy flow and relaxing the 4 flow symmetry without 3 flow symmetry. So long as the dipole statically exists, imagine an electret suddenly formed or a charged capacitor with no leakage, then real usable electromagnetic energy will continuously pour from the dipole at light speeds in all directions. At the same time, reactive electromagnetic power, actually energy, will continuously flow into the dipole from the time domain, the complex plane, and be transduced into real electromagnetic power output in 3 space by the dipole. So he's saying there, if you were able to make a system where you just have your dipole is permanent, then energy is constantly flowing. One of the other things as well they talked about, which I think I skipped over, maybe we'll get to it in a second, is that your circuit that you create, it's extracting more energy out of the vacuum than it's actually using, but the rest of that energy just end up going to waste. It's not being captured. That's another interesting thing to think about. Where are we at? A dipole and its scalar potential thus comprise a true negative resistor system of the most fundamental kind. The dipole continually receives electromagnetic energy in usable form, reactive power, which cannot perform real work, converts it to a usable form, real power, which can perform work, and outputs it as usable, real electromagnetic energy flow in three-dimensional space or three space. Simultaneously, at its formation, the dipole initiates a continuing giant negentropy, a progressive reordering of a substantial and usable portion of the vacuum energy. Further, this reordering of the vacuum energy continuously spreads in all directions from the initiation point at the speed of light. In original atoms formed shortly after the beginning of the universe, dipoles, and as we can see, shall also see, charges have been pouring out real electromagnetic energy in three space for some 15 billion years or so, probably a lot longer now. Each has reordered a fraction of the entire vacuum's energy, where the magnitude of the reordering varies inversely as the radial distance from the dipole. If the dipole is destroyed, the ordering of the vacuum energy ceases, leaving a separated chunk of reordered vacuum energy that continues to expand and propagate radially at the speed of light in all dimensions, steadily reducing in local intensity as it expands. At any very small volume in space-time, from the dipole dynamics of the universe, it follows that a great conglomerates of reordered vacuum energy flows and fluxes, some continuous, some chopped, is continually passing through that 4 volume. Further, the situation is totally nonlinear, so that direct wave-to-wave interactions occur continuously amongst these energy flows and waves. We hypothesize that this is the actual mechanism constituting Puthoff's cosmological feedback mechanism. Interesting that he referenced Puthoff there, guys, because Puthoff has another paper related to this, and you can tell right away there's a connection here. The energy he's talking about is the 0 point energy that's out there. Okay. Further, in 1904, Whittaker showed that any electromagnetic field or wave pattern can be decomposed into 2 scalar potential functions. Each of these 2 potential functions, of course, decomposes into the same kind of harmonic longitudinal electromagnetic wave pairs, as shown in Whittaker in 1903, plus superposed dynamics. In other words, the interference of scalar potentials, each of which is actually a set of longitudinal electromagnetic waves and not a scalar entity at all, but multivectorial entity, produces electromagnetic fields and waves and their dynamics. So what he's saying here is that we can basically produce energy at a low distance, because if there's energy all around us and all we need to do is create a dipole, then potentially we can take our scalar potentials and interfere them, and we can create energy at a distance. This is basically how it connects directly to what some of his later work that we were reading. Actually, some of his earlier work that we were reading. Hence, we hypothesize that the Whittaker interference of the propagating reordered electromagnetic energy entities continuously occurring at any point in space generalizes the 0 point electromagnetic field energy fluctuations of the vacuum itself. Indeed, as an AS group paper by Evans et al. Has already shown that such a scalar interferometry produces transverse electromagnetic fields and waves in the vacuum. So it sounds like he's saying that this is happening all the time, and this is what orders the energy all around us. And if we have an equilibrium state, then our energy is going to be, we're not even going to be able to notice it. It's the same problem we have where we look through outer space and we see that the speed of light is constant. Well, it's just because we're in an equilibrium state. Okay. What is going on here? Scarlett Johansson. Okay, I'm going to skip through the time part because we're already almost 30 minutes in here. I want to look at, where was the part? Connection between the field and source. This part, I think. Yeah, this is what I want to read. Okay. We're going to read these next 3 paragraphs, and then we're going to watch the video. So now that we've kind of understood enough about it to be dangerous, we're going to dig through that. Yeah, energy at a distance is some Tesla stuff. Well, Tesla figured it out. I mean, look at who he was just referencing here. Thomas Bearden was just referencing Whittaker in 1903 and 1904, guys. It's 120 years ago. you start to wonder how and why a lot of this could be suppressed from us. We're going to look at the entropic versus negative entropic here, and this is going to start to make sense for you guys. So entropy is like your system loses energy due to heat. Entropy is the energy you're losing in your system. So what is negative entropy? The energy that you're gaining in your system. So this is where conventional electrical engineering doesn't really understand it. They don't really understand energy at all. Actually, that's the funny part. Like most electricians and electrical engineers actually don't even understand energy. Pretty ironic. Okay, entropic engineering. When we make entropy, we must do work. Okay, so think of when the Casimir plates come together, we have to do work. We have to expand them. Work is basically just using energy. We wrestle nature fiercely to the mat, so to speak, by brute force. All the while, nature protests our entropic brutality by providing the Newtonian third law reaction force back upon our causative wrestler performing the forcing. So again, when we connect, we have to pull it apart. Nature's forcing us to pull it apart. To do entropic engineering, we have to continually input energy to the wrestling mechanism or engine, losing a bit of the input energy in inefficiencies. So again, this is why people say that the Casimir force, you can't get free energy out of the Casimir force. Because even though we have it coming together, we have to pull the things apart, which means we have to do work to pull it apart. And when we're pulling it apart, we're losing a little bit of energy due to inefficiencies. And fighting the back EMF, back MMF, or Newtonian third law reaction that is nature's protest all the while. Those are nature's penalties for imposing three-space electromagnetic energy flow symmetry upon her to nature as an additional highly undesired condition. In short, with three symmetry, we have to provide the continual input energy to our entropic process by burning fuel, damming rivers, erecting windmills, building water wheels, erecting solar arrays, building nuclear power plants, building and charging chemical batteries, etc. So all of these things we're doing work, right? The wind, the solar, pulling the panels apart, any of this stuff. In the process, we destroy and pollute the biosphere on a giant scale as we rip down forests, strip mine, and drill the earth, and spill pollutants into the atmosphere, the rivers, the oceans. We do all of that biospheric destruction because we inexplicably insist upon three-space energy flow symmetry, and thus adamantly require nature's adherence to classical equilibrium thermodynamics. Okay? We have to pay continuously for insisting on doing atrocious entropic work, pulling the plates apart. In doing so, we tie nature's feet down with that added arbitrary requirement for three symmetry and energy flow. We ourselves prohibit nature from performing the giant neg entropy she so dearly loves and very much prefers. We also arbitrarily and meanly discard the bountiful electromagnetic energy three flow that nature loves to furnish us with so freely when we indulge in her vast preference for neg entropy. Neg entropy engineering. Okay. So hopefully you guys understood the first part. Like, we classical mainstream scientists just think in terms of entropy, entropic engineering. They think that if we have a reaction, we must put energy in and input it. We don't think about, this is kind of like whenever we want to get oil out of the ground, we have to go and we have to dig it up. Can you imagine if every single time we wanted to get oil, we would have to go dig it up every time? No, we just build a pump. We just build a fucking pump, and then we're pumping it out, and it's just pouring out, right? And we're getting more energy out than it takes to pump it to pump it out. That's what essentially we need to be able to figure out. So we're not going to sit there and we're not going to just dig up the oil every time or dig up the energy every single time. It's inefficient as hell, and that's how we think we force ourselves into a box where we think we must work that way. So neg-entropic engineering. A far better way is to cooperate with nature and let nature make copious neg entropy. To do that, We now can see that a startling simple mechanism. We simply make a little dipole entropically. So we have to pay for making the dipole once, and we have to do a little gentle violence to nature once. Then we do not need more violence. If we just leave the dipole intact and do not destroy it. So if we create our situation where we've got our positive charge up here and our negative charge here, what's going to happen? The negative is going to attract towards the positive, and we can create our circuit. So instead of destroying that and letting it become equilibrium, we want to make sure that it stays as a dipole. So how do we do that? That's the big rub here, right? When we make the dipole, we make a little bit of broken three symmetry in the universe's energy flow, right? So once you break the symmetry, you make the dipole, you put the positive charges, separated them from the negative charges, voila. Now nature sings for joy as finally having her feet freed from the shackles of three symmetry energy flow. In great glee, she instantly sets to reordering a substantial and usable portion of the vacuum energy in all directions at the speed of light. As long as we do not destroy the dipole, the broken three symmetry, which breaks the shackles, nature's feet remain freed from three space symmetry, and she delightedly continues to reorganize a portion of the vacuum energy with reordering spreading radially outward at the speed of light. Simultaneously, in great gratitude, nature pours out an immense real electromagnetic energy, three flow from that little dipole. She will continue to pour it out forever if we do not destroy the dipole. So there you go. There is our answer. If you make the pump, now we can just have energy constantly flowing out. And nature's going to reorder, and it's just going to constantly pour more energy in. It's just going to keep pouring back out. Right? Pretty wild, right, guys? Like, once you look at it this way, you just go, how the hell have we not been doing this forever? Because now you guys understand the concepts. Now it's just a matter of, okay, how do we engineer it so that we don't have to pull the plates apart with the Casimir effect? We want to get the Casimir effect force, but we want to keep it stuck in place where we can use the work, but without having to pull it apart every single time. So entropic versus negentropic engineering. To summarize, if we make entropy, we tie nature's feet and she forces us to pay for it and pay continuously. If we make negentropy, we only pay a very tiny one-time initiation fee. From then on, a delighted nature pays for us for our thoughtfulness and pays us copiously, continuously, and freely. The smart thing to do is just make a little bit of entropy wisely and use it to break three-space energy flow, basically to make a dipole. Then we should, adapting a phrase, leave that mother of all negative resistors and free energy generators alone. We should concentrate on intercepting, extracting, and using the free energy copiously flowing forth from the ongoing neg entropy without destroying the dipole that is freely providing it. So it's like we want to start the fire up. Once you start the fire up, then we just keep it going. Because it takes a pain to start the fire up, right? We got to put the logs there. We got to get some kindling. And, that's the hard part. Once it's going, we're good. We're good to go, right? You need a security detail, Ashton. I love these comments because it tells me I'm over the target. If I was out here spewing bullshit, people would be like correcting me nonstop. So, and this is the most important part, guys. Like, a lot of people say, can you show me the energy device? It doesn't matter if I show you the device if you don't understand how it works. You need to understand why it's within the laws of physics. The best thing is once you understand how the laws of physics work, then you can create your own. You can realize it's like I'm giving you the building blocks to figure out how to do it yourself. Right? Okay, now I think we're going to switch over. Yeah, let's switch over to watch the video now, guys. I just want to see if I don't think he has like a specific engineering capability thing here for this, but I'll read more through the rest of this on next week, and we're going to dig more into it. But as you can see, this paper is quite long. I think it's 30 pages or so. But take a look at that on your own time. Okay. So now we're going to watch this video.
built at our universities, in our national labs and everything.
And it's frozen here in the beginning, but he starts moving his mouth here in a second. Yeah, the part that people wonder, like, okay, we've got these scientific papers, we got these videos. People like Thomas Bearden, guys, realize this guy's worked in black projects. He has NDAs. He's saying as much as he's allowed to say without literally being killed. Let's just put it out there, right? If he actually showed you how to engineer it specifically, then you wouldn't be seeing these videos and you wouldn't be seeing him. That's the sad state of suppression that's out there. And that's what makes it really difficult, because a lot of people are like, well, I want to see it or whatever. And sometimes people do show it and then they also get ignored. You know, a lot of people say, if you just showed it, people would believe you. Dude, I've got like 10 videos of showing free energy devices that are real free energy devices that nobody is going to believe no matter what. Right. Because then the next step is they say, oh, well, you have to show it to me, or you have to go see it in person and test it yourself and blah, blah, blah. It's like the goalposts constantly shift. There's no standard of proof for people that don't want to believe and don't understand the science themselves. So the most important part is you need to understand the science yourself, and then you won't need to have people show you because you know it's possible. Simple as that. Hey, Evan, welcome to the party, brother. Sorry, I started a little bit early tonight. I have to drop off a little bit after the top of the hour here. So that's why. We're going to have a slow, short one. I don't think I've showed this interview yet, so here we go.
And then settle this argument once and for all. All you got to do is do state-of-the-art efficiency in the switching. Don't try to use too strong a current to begin with. Use a very small trickle current. All you want is that field at that short period of time when you have transit through the back MMF zone. That's all you want.
It's timing.
Timing is everything. You have to pay for the timing and the switching. You don't have to pay for the energy. If there's one law we need to pound in every engineer's head, you have to pay for timing and switching. You don't have to pay for the energy. That's nonsense. The energy comes right straight out of the vacuum for free from all the charges.
Interesting. So you have to pay for the timing and you have to pay for the switching. The way I'm interpreting this now, based on what we read on that paper, is you have to pay for keeping the dipole apart. We got to make sure the dipole doesn't break, right? We want that dipole to stay asymmetrical, out of equilibrium state, so that pump is constantly flowing. So we have to pay to keep that, but we don't have to pay for the energy itself. The energy will just flow out freely to us infinitely forever.
So that's one engine that we wanted to discuss that could be built by any craft shop, or any outfit that builds motors and generators could easily build it with their own staff and workers that they already have. They would have to think a little differently, just a tiny bit differently.
Is that the same as the magnetic Wankel engine?
Yes, that's the magnetic Wankel engine. They actually put that engine one time.
Magnetic Wankel engine. Did you guys hear that? Magnetic Wankel. Yeah, I found it. Okay, well, we got something else to look at. So now you can also see, guys, why are magnets going to become important here as well? You can tell that magnets are going to become important because if we're trying to keep our dipoles separate, well, it's all based on electromagnetic fields. So imagine like an alternating magnetic field. Maybe an alternating magnetic field is a way where you can keep the dipole apart. That's the first thing I thought of when it came to magnets. Is like, okay, well, we want charges on one side and charges on another. Well, what if we put an alternating magnetic field through it? And that just keeps them apart. And now your energy is just flowing and flowing and flowing and flowing. And why am I thinking about that? Well, I'm literally out here selling a magnetic motor. So, magnetism to me has always been the key to free energy, even before I understood any of this.
I'm in a Wankel car.
It just proves the principle that it can fire into the track, see? So there's the pole. And then there's, see, that acceleration that takes place in the magnets. Like this, see? It goes around there for free, but then comes by and triggers itself again, see? Watch. See it?
Right.
And then down here is a dead spot, see?
Why didn't you run the magnets all the way around?
Because we just wanted to see if it would accelerate through the track.
Okay.
We just wanted to experimentally see that it would run.
So by just
and do what they said it would. And it does. Of course, you get much finer with this, right?
right.
You get real finer in detail with this and make the pole.
I mean, I think it's funny when you watch this. How do people not think that a magnetic motor can't work? It definitely can work. No doubt, right? Because now imagine, like somebody just said in the chat, pulsing back. It's not that you need to have a constant energy flow. You don't need to constantly put energy into the system. You pulse it. You pulse the energy into the system. Why? Because we just need to keep the dipole apart. That's all. We just need to make sure keep our dipole intact, right? And as long as we've got that, then we're going to have energy continuously pouring out. And so now the question is, how do we make our system super efficient? We can have input energy. Input energy is allowed. This is why I tell people, when you're trying to produce free energy, don't try to do it with no input. Do it with an input, but try to make it so that your input is less than your output. That's the secret. That's still free energy, as long as your input's less than your output, because you can feed back in the output to the input. And then you can do your pulses. You can pay for your pulses.
Piece bigger and the magnets closer together.
What is a dipole? You should Google dipole, but dipole is basically positive and negative charges that are separated. Because when you have your positive and negative charges separated, and you attach it to a circuit, this is what causes the flow. And when you have your flow here in your circuit, that's what is producing the electromagnetic fields that creates your pointing vector, your power, basically. That's how the power is basically coming from the ether. Anytime you create a dipole in a circuit system, you're essentially producing energy.
And the thing would fly. I mean, because it goes now. It's just a model to prove that the theory worked.
And so you just you were satisfied with that, so you just...
Yeah, somebody just said our dipole moment is the same as a bar magnet, right? You have your positive and your negative, creating your magnetic field. Same idea.
Quit.
Well, I couldn't do anything with it. It's a patented item, you know. I can make one,
Right.
but you can't sell them.
Yeah, I think it hasn't patent expired now.
I don't know.
Yeah. When did you build this?
When I put the pages up on the internet, when was that? 96.
Funny part is I'm sitting here just thinking, like, how have they been keeping this secret? How the fuck have they been keeping this secret? And the answer is they would brainwash. They've just brainwashed people. People have been brainwashed to think it's not possible. That's it. And some people have woken up, like this guy right here. I don't know if this is Benili or Bendini or whatever, but some people have woken up and then they figure it out. There's many ways to produce. Many ways to produce free energy.
96?
In fact, cold fusion is 100% coming from the ether. Now that we understand that all power comes from the ether, all sources of overunity, all sources of free energy are coming from the ether. They're coming from the 0-point energy. All of them are. It's just one big system of energy that we're in, right? Doesn't that just make more sense too? Like for me, the thing about physics, guys, is that when I took physics, I always felt like there was something missing. Like I'm not getting the full picture. It never just felt right. The moment I started learning about 0-point energy and how it can manipulate gravity, how we can extract that energy, I just went, this solves everything. This makes so much sense to me. That's why I'm so adamant and such a big advocate for it, because it's just all the science adds up. It all just makes perfect sense compared to all the bullshit that we get fed. It's like there's inconsistencies in all the physics concepts they try to teach us.
Yeah, I wanted to see, I was working with some magnets and I wanted to see if that track theory worked.
Right.
And it does.
So if you ran the magnets all the way around, it would run...
It would run like the magnetic Wankel.
Right.
But I didn't want to make it too obvious.
You disconnected, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't want to make it too obvious.
I see. You wanted to stay this side of the patent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
It's not mine, so
Yeah.
I want to stay away from it.
Yeah. Hitachi had... Hitachi had, they had a scooter or something.
The reason it's not on the market.
You can just name drop Hitachi as well, right?
Market is because the Japanese Yakuza has suppressed the Japanese engines that are over unity off the market.
The Yakuza suppressed the over unity engines in Japan. Did you guys just hear that? So people wonder, why is it not on the market? Literally the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, suppressed it off the market.
including
Holy shit.
the Kauai.
Guys, just for the record, I would never harm myself. I'm getting a little bit worried. I've never harmed myself. I'm perfectly a sane body and mind. Just need to say that one more time.
Engine, which was suppressed here in Huntsville, Alabama, directly in front of my eyes and directly in front of the people that I work with, my associates here. We have plenty of witnesses as to when Kauai's engine was seized and when control of his company and his fate was seized by the Japanese Yakuza looking at us across the table. So this is not hearsay. This is something we absolutely experienced ourselves personally, and multiple people did.
Mr. Kauai.
This is the Kauai engine. We had just reached an agreement with Kauai, and Kauai does another trick that switches the back MMF path into a forward MMF. He switches the path. And if you apply the Kauai process to a high efficiency magnetic motor, for example, a Hitachi motor, you can get one at 0.7 to 0.8 efficiency. The COP will be about double the efficiency. So you'll get 1.4 and 1.6 for your COPs. Again, totally consistent with physics and thermodynamics, nothing magical at all. Had his...
You guys still don't think magnetic motors can work? You guys still don't think magnetic motors can work? You just hear what he just said right there? Said you can basically just take your magnetic motor that's only producing COP 8.8 or 0.9, and once you apply this process to it, now it doubles your COP, and now your coefficient of performance is greater than 1. Hello. So now you're starting to realize it's the engineering. It's not just building your motor. You got to engineer it so that you are either pulsing your energy in, or whatever you need to do in order to make it efficient. Efficient from the perspective of the input is doing the minimum amount of work necessary. We don't need to pull the plates apart every single time. We just have to do something that basically will pull the plates apart for us without doing all of that work. So we're not going to be in a plate process.
System and company and everything not been seized, we would have had, that was 96, we would have had Kauai engines worldwide on the market in 1997. And that's what stopped it, and that's what's stopping it today. So there are systems.
Next time somebody says why it's not on the market, guys, you tell them because of the Yakuza hid it. You tell them the fucking Yakuza, Japanese mafia, hid free energy from the world. It's not even just JP Morgan. The literal Yakuza prevented the free energy devices in the late 90s. Holy shit.
Which work.
I'm making a martini, chat. I'm making a martini.
Wanted to do work on the Kauai engine, it works just like what he put in the patent. If you will carefully do the patent and use state-of-the-art switching, photon-coupled switching, you can build a Kauai engine, and if you'll start with a high-efficiency motor instead of a low-efficiency motor like we commonly have, you can have a motor that will go over unity. Kauai already had one with positive feedback to run itself. That's the one we would have put on the market. So that's another one that anybody wants to build something absolutely legitimate. If you will take the time and the trouble and do it state-of-the-art switching, you can do it with the Kauai motor just as it's stated in the patent. There's nothing false in that patent. Another engine I'd like to talk about is a permanent magnet motor altogether, without any switching or without any trickle currents or anything. Now, let's reason together. If I'm going to violate this second law of thermodynamics, I'm going to have an extra input of energy from the environment. If the only energy going into the system is what I pay to put in, that system is never going over unity, because it's got losses. I'm back in leaky diode engineering. I'll put in some, leak out some along the way, I'll get out less than what I put in. As simple as that. If I'm going over unity and all I have available is leaky diodes, I have to have something else putting in energy. What it turns the diode into a triode. I'm paying for the grid signal and something else is putting in most of the energy. So understand very clearly, we cannot do this unless we receive in these permanent magnets an extra pulse of energy for free from the environment. So how can we do that? All I've got is permanent magnets. Where's the energy going to come from? Well, nature has been most kind. In magnetism, there are some 200 or so known magnetic effects. Well known, in a textbook, in a handbooks, you can go look at them. But only about 100 or so of them are well understood. The other 100 vary from somewhat understood to not understood at all. I want that to be clear. Magnetism has many areas that are still not well understood at all. Many times just an ad hoc theory. So, but there are lots and lots of rich effects in magnetism if you dig them out and look at them out of the magnetic materials handbooks. One of these is the exchange force. Go into Feynman's 3 volumes of physics and read what he says about exchange forces, for goodness sake. The magnetic materials themselves can undergo a sudden flip of the spins of the electrons. And that is a sudden magnetic field pulse, because the spins have to do with the magnetic spin in the magnetic field. Isn't that interesting? Long before we had what today we're calling...
Yes, what is magnetism indeed? Guys, do you guys still think that magnetic motors aren't possible? How do we know magnetic motors not possible when we don't even understand magnetism, as he just described? So now you guys are already, if you guys have been paying attention today, you're starting to learn what the secret sauce is. You're starting to put the pieces together. We've understood the concepts of how it's possible. And now we're starting to figure out, like, okay, well, how do we keep our dipole intact? Right? That's what we're trying to figure out now. How do we pay less than what we're going to get on our output?
Spintronics, where we are actually using these spins and beginning to build semiconductors and things that do spin flipping. People like Howard Johnson and people that doing experiments with the exchange forces were doing it a long time ago. Howard Johnson was working in what today is called spintronics 50 years ago, before that word was ever even born. But he was chasing and getting the spins to flip. So let's build a permanent magnet motor first that won't run itself, and then let's make it into one that will run itself. Wouldn't that be interesting? So what we do...
Wow. Okay, so he just explained it, right? So I'm starting to get a little worried about how much I'm saying, actually, but we're just going to keep pushing it. So remember the device that I showed before, the Haddam motor. There was somebody posted a video that claimed that they debunked it, that they tried to build it themselves and it failed, right? Now, why did it fail? Thomas Bearden just explained it. You can make a motor, magnetic motor, but if you don't engineer it correctly, it's never going to produce over unity. If you just hook up an input to it and expect it to just produce your output without thinking about how the input's working, and you just you can put continuous energy into it, it's never going to produce over unity. Never, ever. This is why the debunk of the magnetic motor is fraudulent. It's literally fraudulent work. And when I say the word fraudulent, I literally mean that the people that produce the debunk of the magnetic motor are frauds, and they don't understand electrical engineering. They don't understand electricity. If they want to try to sue me, I would be happy to go to court about it, because I know the real science that they don't know, and we can prove that it works, period. So no one will ever sue me over this. The debunkers are literal frauds and literal scammers that post fake information that is not based in real physics. Magnetic motors do work 100%. It's all about how you engineer it in order to get it to produce coefficient performance greater than 1. The tuning part is key.
Stator, and I'm going to use in my rotors, I'm going to use north poles on all the poles that are there. And in my stator, around the outside that's fixed, I'm going to use south poles. So let's take one pair of these poles with the rotor north pole coming into the south pole. Now, I'm in the forward MMF position, am I not? This thing is attracting it in, and so it's adding to the angular momentum of the shaft, and this thing is picking up energy storage all the time, till the poles now actually oppose. Well and good, I got a lot of energy that nature gave me that I didn't have to pay, that's now stored in my system. However, as it continues to rotate, if I don't change anything, I pay back every bit that I gained, because I entered the back MMF where it's trying to pull it back in the other rotation direction. And it subtracts back all of the energy it gave me for storage. I pay back everything. And since I got some other losses from the bearing frictions and fighting the wind, the air, to actually turn in it against the wind, against the force, I have losses. So this system will not self-rotate. I can give it a big spin to begin with, and it'll flip around a few times, and it'll run down, and it'll stop. That's it. Well known, no problem. So what's new? And what's wrong with that? How am I going to make that self-rotate, taking its energy from the vacuum? Well, I've got to follow my basic principle. If I want that to self-rotate, I'm going to have something which injects some extra energy. And if it's pulse form, that's better, because that gets under the thermodynamics that's known to violate the second law, already accepted. So I need some pulse inputs, a powerful pulse, to get a good bit of energy in that thing so I can have enough left to overcome my wind resistance I'm paying for and my friction and my bearings. Can I do that? Yes, indeed. The exchange force will do that for you. What Howard Johnson did was find complex assemblies of magnets, little magnets he cut in special forms and shapes and all of this. And over years, he found how to put together sets of these, so that just as he has a rotor magnet passing the stator magnet in attractive mode, just as it enters that back MMF mode where it's payback time, the stator magnet will suddenly, the materials themselves will suddenly generate a spin flip.
Yep.
Flip the spins, and that will generate a very powerful pulse, and you've got to get it in the direction you want it on the other magnet so that it adds to the rotation. So it's tricky to do that, and it took him a long time to discover just how to do that, and just how to cut those magnets, and just what kind of magnets, and all of that. But he eventually solved the problem of how to do that. Now, if you will check Feynman's 3 volumes, you will find that this sudden force that occurs for the exchange force can be hundreds of times stronger than the magnetic fields and the magnets you're using, momentarily. But it can be a very powerful pulse. Johnson developed a series of magnetic gates and rotors passing stators and so forth, where the exchange force is in fact evoked. The pulse goes in, you get enough of it in the right direction to kill again the back MMF section, overcome it, and produce a forward MMF section. You need it just for a little bit till you get out of the MMF.
So do you guys understand what he's talking about here? I'm going to break it down real briefly, right? So you've got your magnets, okay? What can I use here? Let's use these coins to presume they're magnets, okay? I've got my north magnet and I've got my south magnet. As they approach one another, they're going to be attracted to one another like this, right? So you're getting the free movement as they're approaching. But once they get past one another, so I've got this rotating, let's say, motor, right? Once it gets past it, now I have to start paying it back, because now since they're attracting each other after it's moving down this way, it wants to go back towards one another. So you're getting, think of it as like gaining free energy here, but you're paying back the energy when you get past it. So how do you fix this? Well, once it gets to the point, now we need to basically invert the magnetic field at this point, or override it, so to speak. Because if we inverted it, let's say now they're both 2 north poles, then what's going to happen is now I'm going to get free energy as it goes down this way, because it's going to repel one another. So if you can imagine that every time you were flipping this coin, so you get here, flip the coin. Next one comes around, get here, flip the coin, right? And you do a system like this, now you would be getting energy over and over. And all we're doing now is we're just paying for flipping the magnetic field around using a pulse. Flip the poles. Yep. Just like JK Philly fan said. So there's a concept that I just came up with right now based on that, which is what he's pretty much saying here, is that if you were able to either override the attractive force or flip it, so now it becomes a repulsive force, now you've got a free energy device.
The back MMF. Then you're okay. Because if my back MMF is now deep.
So now you're starting to realize it's not a matter of just building your device. It's not a matter of just building a device when there's magnets on it. Because now you realize that from the back, he's saying the forward MMF and the backwards MMF are going to cancel each other out. But if you override that second half and you can reverse that, flip that around, change that, now you've engineered it, you've tuned it in a way where you're producing free energy now.
Increased. Less than my forward MMF. And if I don't lose too much losses in my system, that system will power itself and self-rotate and power load. And that's true. And you didn't violate a single law of physics, and you did not violate thermodynamics once you include the broken symmetry of the dipole and where the energy is coming from.
Now, is that pulse
Wow, I
have an
was right.
electrical switcher on it, or is it all just...
No, it's just the electrons themselves that are making the magnetism just suddenly flip. And that's the spin of the electron flips, and that's a tremendous pulse when it does.
So the timing is also...
Timing is critical. The timing is what is the most...
So the timing is critical. Why is the timing critical? Because we need it to flip right when it hits this point. That's when we need it to flip, right? So if we do our two magnets again, our positive and our negative, our north and south, we need it to flip right here when they get next to each other. So let me go full screen real quick. So we're getting free energy, free energy, free energy. Now we're going to be losing energy when we get to this point. So where do we want to flip? Right here. So if we have two motors that are spinning around like this, we need the magnets to flip every time like this, right? Every time they get to this point, flip, flip, flip. And ideally, we need it to flip, and then we need it to flip back. But so there's going to be this resonance, right? We need it to be flipping at a very specific time. And as long as we have it flipping at the right times with our pulsed input, we've just created a free energy device. Magnets, everybody, magnets. Yeah, it's like when you push the swing at the right time. It's a really good analogy as well. It's like you've got your swing going. Well, you don't push the swing when it's coming back at you, right? That's not when you want to push the swing. You want to wait for the swing to come, and then you give it the push, and then it's going to get, further, right? Same idea. Good. That's a really good analogy, actually. I like that. Thank you very much, Siljo. Good analogy.
critical thing on it. And everything physically that you do to this assemblies of magnets affects that timing. That
Flip, Philadelphia. Flip, Philadelphia. People who don't know, it's always sunny.
is what the material is made of, exactly the shapes that you put together, and it's going to determine which way the pulse goes, and getting it to occur at exactly that right time. See, he's doing it all mechanically. He doesn't have any switching.
There's no electronics.
It's the assembly that determines the switching. So that's very precise work and very intricate work to do that. But it's a doable. It is certainly a doable. But you've got to be very precise and have good machine precision in the way you make your magnets, and you got to pay the penalty to find out how to do all that. But once you evoke the exchange force by whatever means, you can use spintronics to do it now. By whatever means you evoke the exchange force, you can in fact have the materials themselves take from the vacuum extra energy and give you a tremendous pulse of energy that adds that energy you need to your system and overcomes that back MMF. And that system will then permissibly power itself and power load, take any energy from the vacuum by its fundamental dipolarity, its fundamental broken symmetry in that vacuum flux. Everything is good physics. There's no hokum, there's no sleight of hand, there's no magician's trick or anything. There's pure science behind it. Doesn't mean it's easy in that case, but it can be done.
You could essentially build the equivalent of a hydroelectric dam.
That's correct.
Now you guys see why I love Dave Rossi so much, because, yeah, in a lot of his interviews I did with him, he explained all these concepts. I just wasn't smart enough to figure it out just yet. But now when you're watching it now, and I see people in the Discord as well, where people are having their mind blown right now because you're hearing how the secret sauce works right now, right?
In the middle of a desert.
That's correct.
Now you know why when I saw this video, I was like, well, we're watching this tonight. Holy shit. I'm like, the biggest regret I have in my life is not meeting this man. If he was still alive, he would have definitely gone on hard truths with me. I would talk to him every day.
Because it's all magnetics.
That's right.
You don't need any external power. You don't need, it's all timing and natural magnetic forces.
That's right. Many years ago, when Howard first made his first rotary engine.
How did he live past telling all this? Basically, I've heard some stuff, but like basically he started getting gagged, and like I don't know if they started threatening him or whatever, but like Bearden was talking like way too much, but he never really explained all the engineering. And the other thing too is that nobody believed him. If you talk to people now, a lot of people think that Bearden was like some kind of crank back in the 80s. Because if you're talking about this in the 80s, even the 90s, we weren't even close to ready. We're not even close to ready now in the 2020s. Truth is, he was just telling how it works exactly. He's obviously seen it in the labs, right? He's already seen it in the black projects. This kind of information, this level of knowledge doesn't come from you just figured it out in your garage. No, this dude was working in private military contract labs.
Howard brought it down to Huntsville to show me. That was in the 70s. And we sat in my kitchen, And I played with this thing for 2 or 3 hours, just fascinated by it. There wasn't anything in it but permanent magnets, and it just sat there and it ka-clonkety. It was part of it was crudely made. It just went ka-clonkety, 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 and it kept right on going. Now, if something will run 2 hours, ka-clonkety, ka-clonkety, and there's nothing in it but permanent magnets, and it's got that much drag, the bearings weren't even good. He was using an old Lazy Susan, which poor bearings, wasn't precision bearings at all. He just grabbed something and put the magnets he found that would work on. So there was no question about the reality of it. The question then was, how do you explain it? But Johnson knew about the exchange force. He knew exactly what he was trying to do. So Johnson was on, in fact, the proper scientific track that is permitted to build a self-rotating, self-powering magnetic engine. It's only.
The model shown a few weeks ago used frequency drive, maybe to tune it. Maybe. I'm not going to speak anymore about the device related to EtherTech, nor am I probably going to talk too much about that other video. As I've mentioned before, like, I heard through back channels that I pushed it way too far there, probably. That video was not even necessarily supposed to be made. Wasn't even necessarily, they didn't even know that was out there. And I do like living on this planet, so I'm doing as much as I can. This might be pushing it too, but I don't know, whatever.
Did he learn this from observation?
Johnson started working in magnets. See, Johnson's in his 80s right now. As a young engineer and everything, he used to work for.
See, veritable genius gets it, right? The most difficult part is not even engineering. We're listening to engineering right now. This video is from early 2000s. The problem is sociological, not technological. The problem is taking it to market. The mind block that people have is the issue. Now, hopefully you guys understand why people say open source it. What do you mean open source it? I'm watching a video of Thomas Bearden explaining exactly how to do it, right? This video, Thomas Bearden is explaining exactly how to make a magnetic motor work. What more do I need to do to people? It's not a matter of, I'm not a preacher trying to tell people what to believe in. I'm literally trying to teach people science so that they understand it for themselves.
I believe it was Chrysler. He did the magnetic brakes for Chrysler way back there. Johnson did.
Sorry, this has been debunked, still, Joe. It's 13 years old. Anything longer than 10 years old is fake. Didn't you know? That's how YouTube works. Apparently, if you show something that's older than 10 years old, it's automatically been debunked. It's automatically fake. Why doesn't it already exist, guys? If it was real, it should exist. It does exist.
Did some very unique things.
Or my favorite, if this was real, you'd be a billionaire immediately.
He was a specialist in silencers, for example. There's a lot of patents in silencers back there.
For guns?
How to silence things that make racket. Johnson silenced a locomotive one time. Cut that noise way down to where if you were a certain distance from it, you didn't hear the locomotive. He could silence a chainsaw pretty good. Things like that. So he had some very unique things he had to do in his engineering experience. But he was a specialist in that kind of thing, and he started off working in the magnetics. He read up everything that he could find about the effects in magnetic materials. So Johnson got on to the spin and spin flipping very early, when very few people knew about it at all. It was an idle curiosity in a few lines in the text somewhere. We didn't have what today is trying to be born as spintronics. Now we're trying to create a whole science based on just spin flipping. Johnson has been working in spin flipping for 50 years. Very fine individual, I might add. He's a very fine human being. I'm very proud of the fact and very grateful that I was permitted to work with Johnson and have been for many years, still working with him today. I got into this kind of thing because first was an interest in strange weapons that I ran into the Soviets were building when I was working in that area. And then that led me into energy, because the problem that we ran into with trying to figure out what these Soviet weapons were, they were not using normal electrical engineering. They had modified it into a science they called energetics, which was highly classified, and they never have released it really to this day. What they really did is correct all the errors in the model. And when you do that, you can do all kinds of things that we've discussed a little bit that you can't do with normal, much more limited electrical engineering. So they were able to build very special weapons using that. But it has beautiful applications in medical and in energy fields. So, you know, it's a perfectly legitimate science if we take the old electrical models we have and change them and update them by what we've learned from physics. We will have then what the Soviets have been, the Russians today have been calling energetics for a long time. And we can do some marvelously beneficial things for human beings with that. One of it is in the energy field, and the other particularly is in the medical field. So that got me into the energy field. And then I started working with inventors. I started working early on with Frank Golden, and we talked about building the motor that kept adapting its environment and gradually got up over unity. And we didn't understand the mechanism going on at all, but it did get up to the performance, rigorous measurements. So that was very interesting. But again, I was fortunate to be able to work with an inventor who was actually inventing things like that. I showed Frank one day. Frank did another thing. He was, since Professor William Tiller, former head of the Material Sciences Department at Stanford, was also connected with that project with what was formed then as Astron Corporation. Professor Tiller knew a great deal about the magnetic vector potential A, which of course we didn't. And Frank thought so much of that that he decided he would build some A potential antennas, which he did. It was interesting because the CB radio was just coming into vogue. And
William asked, when are you going to start inventing? Who said I'm not? I mean, I'm out here selling stuff, but yeah, I mean, if I, let's just say, put it like this. If I was doing inventing, I'm smart enough to not talk about it publicly. Let's leave it at that.
And all the truck drivers had them, you know, they started the vogue because they were chatting to each other and all. And Frank would take a CB radio and hook up his special magnetic vector potential antenna, and the little radio that's supposed to give you about a mile down the road would knock their socks off about 20 miles down the road. And these truck drivers would say, man, what have you got? What kind of rig have you got there, you know? But we knew we were onto something when the antenna performed so admirably. But Frank did build a whole series of special antennas, which some of those, plus some other modifications to them, Astron markets to this day. Astron Corporation still exists. I still own some stock in it. But I was fortunate to be able to work with Frank because here I was able to work with an inventor where phenomenology was occurring. I was able to see some of the phenomenology and then have to figure out what on earth is going on here. So in the injection of some real good science from Bill Tiller was nice too, because that put our feet in the proper scientific direction rather than wandering off and trying to form a lexicon of our own. We found out this stuff is really in physics, you know, if you know where to look, if you look long enough.
And that is carried through to this day.
That's right. So another thing, I was very fortunate to work with several other inventors that we've named, you know, such as Floyd Sweet, 2 or 3 others along the way, particularly John Bearden. I work with John today and have worked with him for
Bearden and Floyd Sweet. It wouldn't surprise me if these guys' devices were legit. Some of them might not be, but now that we understand the concepts, it's honestly almost trivial, I would say. I can't believe there's not more.
for many years. John, as far as I'm concerned, is probably the single most creative inventor on this planet. And he is what I consider a national asset of inestimable value for what he's already done. So someday the textbooks will be written on what Bearden has really done. It will curl your hair. So that was
interesting. He just said someday the textbooks will talk about what Bearden has done. It'll curl your hair.
another
From Thomas Bearden, that's a pretty big endorsement.
great experience to be able to work all these years with John and actually see things that produced very strange phenomenology electrically on the bench. But see John work out how to make them work. That was the missing ingredient. See, those are other people's discoveries. They are Golden's discoveries or John Bearden's discoveries or Floyd Sweet's discovery. I didn't discover any of that. My job was to work with them and then to sincerely do my best to find out what kind of physics would describe at least pretty close to what was going on.
because they knew they had it. It worked.
They knew it, but they didn't know what the physics was.
This is what I'm going to say on the med bed stuff, guys. The reason why I don't talk about this a lot is twofold. One, I work in healthcare IT. Two, because medical misinformation is a good way where they can end you. Like there's laws specifically that will just straight up take you down. They can even throw you in prison potentially, but they can censor you, they can sue you, any type of medical information. What I will say is I do believe that this science does have medical healing aspects to it. I also think it's very easy to defraud people with stuff claiming that it works when it doesn't really work. But beyond any shadow of a doubt, I believe there's medical healing aspects to this technology, no question.
They had it working, and they had, by trial and error, found out how to make it work. Then the question is, how do you explain it? And my job was to find what kind of physics that thing is using. It's not a simple job because often you can't do that in 6 weeks. It may take 6 years. But if you stay with it and if you get enough phenomenology, gradually you start to narrow in the process. You will accumulate a lot of references that you finally muddled your way through. You accumulate a lot of things that got actually discovered and parked on a bench nobody did much with, and you find out that's what is being done here. So you get slowly, you just narrow in to where you have at least a sort of a decent understanding of what's going on. It isn't perfect, but at least you have a proper physics type approach to what's going on. It can be put in very solid physics, for example.
And what's important about that? What's important about knowing how that, why, and how?
What's important about knowing something of the real physics of it is this. Many inventors have actually done some remarkable things. Stubblefield was certainly remarkable in what he did. Before Tesla got some of his stuff from Stubblefield. And it turned him on to the area. And then Tesla, of course, was a creative genius. But many of the inventors, the physics wasn't born yet, the early inventors that did this, to explain it. The physics wasn't available. So they created their own lexicon, their own terms, their own concepts. And what we have today, there's no way to translate that into physics unless you dig out the physics first. Well, if nobody's ever put together the bits and pieces to make a physics that you could translate to, it never gets translated. It's a chicken or egg situation. So my job was to tackle the chicken or egg situation so that we wind up with a chicken and an egg. If you do that and you have some physics where you can now start to design, you now start to have a technology that can be built and developed and placed on the market eventually and actually go out and be used to power homes and things like that. Until you get both some kind of theory that's workable, some kind of theoretical model that understands and fits this experimental phenomenology to help you with your design of then bigger systems, better systems, more stable systems, you're never going to have a technology.
Can't advance.
It can advance past the early prototype stage or lab bench experiment stage. Those who made it past there, like Ed Gray, went into production on a system. And of course they came in and stopped his production line in Los Angeles, or you'd had Gray systems on the market. So a lot of it was suppressed all the way, and that's very true. T. Henry Moray was absolutely genuine. All his systems were genuine. He had a 50 kilowatt system. But the vested interest came into play. No matter what you like to think, or whether you didn't want to be a conspiracy buff or not, I'm trying to remember the noted writer who said, it's not that there's one conspiracy, there are many, because every big organization's got all kinds of conspiracies going on in it anyway. That's the human situation. That's the 9% that try to manipulate everything. So don't worry about conspiracies. In every big organization, big group, or whatever, including big commercial companies after the Enron scandal, who do we have to convince of that? In every one of those big businesses, you have exactly the thing going on today. Well, people who early on took over power companies and things.
Okay. Well, he's pretty much just going into the conspiracy angles of this now, but you guys already, I mean, my followers have no problem believing in conspiracies and suppression. That's the least thing that I need to convince you guys of out there. I know for sure. For everybody out there, I know they always want the same thing. Show me how it works, explain to me how it works, etc. I hope that I went pretty far in doing that today. we looked at Thomas Bearden's paper. There's a link to it in the YouTube video down below if you want to read it. We watched that video, which was, I believe, was part 2. If you Google Thomas Bearden and extracting energy from the vacuum, it's like a big series. That was part 2 that we were watching right there, where he actually explains parts of the engineering. I didn't expect him to say all of that. So if the PMCs are out there watching, I actually didn't know he was going to say all that, so not my fault. I mean, that's just out there on YouTube. If anyone were to ask me, this is just, this is a big fan fiction that we're doing right now. If anyone were to ask me, but just, that's a joke, by the way, it's obviously real. But the other side of it is the suppression angle. So you can see how the suppression works. Like, you bring it to production and they shut you down, so the big issue, and that was mentioned in the chat as well, is that the suppression of this, the brainwashing of people to think that it's not possible to not understand non-equilibrium thermodynamics. We've brainwashed electricians and electrical engineers not even to understand where power comes from and how it works. And then if you do manage to get through all that brainwashing, then they can just come and shut you down anytime they want. And then if you go and try to go on CNN or you try to make a video showing about it, then you're going to get a bunch of idiot debunkers who are going to say, no, this isn't possible because it breaks the second laws of thermodynamics. A bunch of people who don't know how the laws of thermodynamics work, that have probably never read any real science in their lives. And you're going to get people who are going to recreate it and not be able to engineer it correctly. And they're going to say, I recreated this and it didn't work. And you're going to go, well, because you didn't pulse the current necessary to achieve what you need to be able to achieve to get it to go over unity, right? Like, so it's just crazy, guys. This is the world we live in today. I hope you guys enjoyed the stream today. We might do another ad promptu stream this weekend. We'll see. Not 100% sure. Otherwise, Monday, Malaysian Airlines Monday will be all about the fire event. I spoke to FAA security director, former security director, Billy Vincent. Talked about the fire event with him. Got a bunch of new details. I'm 100% sure that plane had a fire on it, guys. So pretty awesome. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll talk soon, everybody. Peace, everyone. Okay, what should we play us out with tonight? Let's go with... I think we're going to do this MH370 parts 1. Is it this one?
Planes were meant to fly, planes they ain't supposed to fall from the sky. But if they do, they'll leave behind more than a piece or two. Planes just be flying, I know you think I'm lying. The USA, they be hiding the truth, and I ain't buying. Planes they're meant to fly, planes they ain't supposed to fall from the sky. But if they do, they'll leave behind more than a piece or two. They'll leave behind more than I know you think I'm lying. The USA, they be hiding the truth, and I ain't buying. Planes they're meant to fly, planes they ain't supposed to fall from the sky. But if they do, they'll leave behind more than a piece or two. Planes just be flying, I know you think I'm lying. The USA, they be hiding the truth, and I ain't buying. They'll leave behind more than a piece or two.